to do is a valuable little exercise that Phyllis Crystal teaches, where we begin to create healthy boundaries around ourselves, and with great respect, we also put boundaries around the other. Let's say, just as an example, that I have a neighbor, and this isn't true, but let's say I have a neighbor who just is driving me a little, just disturbing me, driving me a little crazy. Every time I go out, the neighbor he has his garbage in front of my house, or he plays his music really loud and just disturbs my peace of soul. And how do you know what to work on? Well, who pops into your head when you first wake up in the morning? This is what you can tell. These are some of the ties that are binding you. And the first person, unless it's a lovely relationship that you're thinking of when you first wake up in the morning, often it's somebody who said something to us a week or two ago. It could be a person who died 20 years ago, and we still remember how they put us down, and it really just contracts our energy field. So begin to analyze who are the people that are binding us. And it's whoever is in our subconscious, and when we first wake up in the morning, that image comes to us, because that really is energy that drains you. So let's take a look at this practice. What we're going to do, we'll use the colors and images of Phyllis Crystal. And Crystal talks about, we're going to put ourselves and put a whole boundary around us. And she uses the color of golden light. She'll use blue light and golden light. Let's have you do this on your hand. So just for a moment, draw a figure 8 on your hand. And as you draw the figure 8 on your hand, you'll notice there are two separate parts, two circles that are created by that figure 8. And what Crystal is having us do is put ourselves in one part of the circle and whatever is bothering us in the other side of the circle. So let's imagine that I'm going to put myself in this first circle, and you can just place yourself on one side, and then think about something that bothers you, and you're going to put it in the other side very respectfully. So what Crystal says is you do this practice when you first wake up in the morning, or after meditation, or before you go to sleep at night, when your subconscious is alert. And the first part of the dynamic is you imagine just a golden light that's limiting your energy behind you and around you. So just do that in your hand. Put yourself in your palm and just draw a golden light around you. So you have this sense of limiting of your energy field. And let's say that we're going to put into the other circle this neighbor, let's call him John, who also I want to respectfully limit him, even though he keeps coming in and out of my energy field. And we draw, again, a circle of golden light around John, very respectfully. So we're putting limits and boundaries around the other also, very respectfully. And then Crystal says, you all know what a blue neon light, neon kind of travels around. You imagine a blue neon light circulating out around the other, and then back and around yourself. So what you're doing with that blue neon light is you're putting even further limits around yourself and around the other. So just draw a couple of figure 8s, the blue neon light outside the golden light, around myself and around the other. And notice what we're doing. We're limiting then the energy exchange just to that one point where we're still connected. You do this for several weeks, several months, several years, sometimes several lifetimes if needed. And let's say you wake up one morning and you decide, I'm ready to separate from this other. You take your implement of choice. Sometimes you need a hatchet or a machete or a knife or a scissors, and you very consciously cut that single tie that's still connecting you. You can just say, I'm cutting off, and you give the other back to themselves, and you take on your own energy field. Now let's take some examples here. this one woman in Colombia where I was working was married to a man, I would have lasted 1 week with him. He was very, very difficult. And she was an activist out in the streets, going after peace and justice. And often what happens, a strong, assertive woman who's dealing with activism often will have a husband who's just the opposite, a battering sort who puts her down and just makes her humiliated in the home. And this woman, let's call her Maria. Maria couldn't leave Juan because she couldn't support the children all by herself. So she had to stay living with him. So as activists do, she wanted to get this over with and really put boundaries around herself. So she did it for like 2 days, and then she said, Pat, it doesn't work. And I said, well, how long did you do it? Oh, 2 days. I said, well, I think you need to do it at least 2 to 6 months. And then when I'm back again in town, you can tell me if it works or not. So she did it for another number of months, and I was back in her town in Colombia. And she called me over. She said, Pat, I'm still living with Juan, but he started liking me. I did this. I started having my own sense of myself. And he kept saying, something's really different about you. And you don't tell Juan, obviously, that you're doing this, but you're literally shifting your own way that you're dealing with the whole situation. And he started, at least he didn't yell at her anymore. He started respecting her ideas and just letting her be her own person. A similar thing happened in Rwanda, and in this case, the man's husband beat her constantly. Every day she got a beating, which was culturally acceptable. And if you were in that culture, you weren't a good husband unless you really beat the wife as if she were an animal. And so this woman decided she wanted to do this. She, again, couldn't get out of the relationship. But after about a year of doing this herself and having her own self-respect, it changed the whole energy dynamic, and he started loving her, which surprised her. She didn't love him, but he actually started admiring her, complimenting her, and stopped beating her at one point. Now again, I don't advocate this for women who are constantly in a negative situation like that. Often it's, the need is to leave the situation, no question, but in cases where you can't leave it, this has been very powerful in some of the cultures where I've worked. So it's worth a try, because what's happening is, it's like Virginia Satir systems theory. Once one aspect of a system changes in a family, the whole system changes. And this is what's upsetting the apple cart here, is my own energy field changes. An energy field where you attract the vulnerability of what you have inside of yourself. This is the victimizing of children who are bullied. And if you begin to have your own sense of your self-worth, often it shifts everything. And working in cultures where there's a lot of bullying, this has also been really great for the kids or the teenagers who are getting a lot of bullying. Japan has so much bullying, a lot of it's internet bullying, down to suicides, where kids teach each other methods of suicide. It's centering myself so I'm no longer pulling victim energy to me. And it's also having that sense of valuing myself. Watch people in a group, people who have really good self-esteem, even little kids in a classroom. They have positive relationships with kids, but a child who's beaten down at home, you can always tell they're then either loners or they're attracting violence coming at them. It's because that's the energy field that's created within them in their own family situation.
Also, I suppose the risk in talking about stuff like this, that it doesn't lead into victim blaming, but it becomes about something about you. You attract this behaviour, it's something to do, and you're responsible for changing the behaviour.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Also, just in the field of epigenetics, some of the Holocaust victims of the Holocaust studies that have been done, being victim for a period of time actually changes your genetics. It's a whole new field called epigenetics. So just be aware of that. This is what we're talking about. And and often we're talking about multi-generational trauma, where we're living out not just our own individual victimhood, but the victimhood of our parents. If a mother is carrying a baby in her womb, the baby receives the energetic field. We're attuned to the energy of the mother, the genetics of the mother or the grandmother. I know I do this work well because of the violence that was in my own family from my grandmother and the psychological violence that my own mother dealt with. So it's like a multi-generational thing. And this is where this is great to teach little children. So if you work with children, what you can do is work with balloons. And let's say a little child, often they have their nightmares. Okay, draw onto the balloons the names of the nightmares. Maybe it's the man down the street, or maybe it's a teacher who's nasty to them. It could be a number of different kinds of nightmares. You can blow up the balloons, and when the child feels that that energy gets contained, pop the balloons or let the balloon go off into the atmosphere. So it's a visualized sense of containment of myself and of the other. Where most of the time when monsters are there, like the monsters overwhelm us and they become fuzzy, fearful things. It's like the no physical presence in the Gaza checkpoint. It's a voice coming at you. It's an imagined fearful type of thing, like the Wizard of Oz. This great monster with a loud voice manipulating, and it was just a wimpy man who was running like a puppet. But these are the things what are our monsters, and they become huge looming beings over us as images of fear, and that's what's important.
Sorry, I was going to say, could you use that exercise of balloons with adults? Because
Absolutely.
sometimes I'm thinking about conversations we have about how you get, if you're trying to get somebody to visualize something, it might be very difficult.
Yeah.
That you might need something concrete to use. So,
or have them draw it.
all right,
or what the Africans will do in some of our African communities, they draw it on their knees. Just do this for a moment. Put, let's say, your one hand on one knee and one hand on another knee. Your hand that is maybe on the left side is yourself, and maybe on the right side it's somebody that's just really bothering you right now. And now just draw a circle between your knees, like a figure eight. And then with the Africans, some of the communities taught us this. Then, let's say you do this for a number of months, and you're really setting yourself separate from this other person. Then you can take whatever is your implement and just separate your knees. You're separate from the other person. So that, or drawing, or whatever would give that image or that sense of containment, that's what we're talking about. So it's a great way to do that. Okay, just one other comment. Crystal says you can't lump a whole series of things. Sometimes we want to, just like the activists, get this done fast and lump everything together and just seal it off. It doesn't work. You need to do this energetically. Let's say you've been raped multiple times, like with some of the people that you're working with. It needs to be done with every significant incident, because for a woman in particular, it's such a kind of penetration of their whole being. So it's important to discern what are the packaged areas that you can put into the center, including body sensation or body image. Maybe I have this sense that like I have big feet, and my big feet used to really bother me as a child. I could never get shoes. And maybe at my age, 74, my big feet still bother me. They don't, because now I can get shoes that fit. But if that still overwhelms me, I could put this limitation of having such big feet, or whatever may be the body part that feels limited or disabled, put that into this energy, because it's an energy that pulls my thought, my consciousness, my being. That's what we're talking about. Quite powerful.
Can I just ask one last question? Sorry.
Sure.
How would somebody know when that cutting was to happen? Is that something somebody would know?
You know, it's like deep within you,
Right.
Intuitively you know. And just one other interesting example, some of you have worked with hospice situations or with death and dying. Often people who need to die can't die, because what would their family do? And this one friend, years ago, Anne was a psychologist and had an inoperable tumor, couldn't die. They tried everything, and she couldn't die. And she decided part of the problem was her son. Her son was 30 and a lawyer, but she felt deep in herself, what would he do without me? So she and her son actually did it, both consciously. And because she was a very skillful psychologist, they could do it conscious of doing it together. So they did it for about 3 months together, and at the end they had just a beautiful ceremony. And they cut the tie. It was like Anne gave her son to himself. She cut the umbilical cord that never was cut. She took on her own life and her right to die if she needed to die, which we all are going to die. And the irony was Anne lived, that the tumor went into remission. Anne lived 10 years longer, started a little school in Mexico, wrote a book, and just died about 2 years ago with a great relationship with her son. It wasn't a codependent relationship. So this is an excellent practice for codependence. If you have codependent relationships or friendships that really are a needy, using type of friendship, this helps you grow up to have the dignity of your own self and to just accept, here I am. And then you can have very healthy relationships, very healthy marriages or partnerships, but without that co-use and codependence that often really gets in the way of that. Okay, so I leave this in your hands, and just know it's a very valuable technique that we use quite a bit in the field. And often people will say afterwards, oh, that changed so much for me, because I never realized how hooked I was in this situation or my family situation or my work situation. Often it's a work codependence or a work toxicity that people are feeling.